The wrought iron gates of Blackwood Estate loomed before Sophia Martinez like the entrance to another world. Clutching her worn suitcase, she walked up the cobblestone driveway, her heart racing with nervous anticipation. The mansion stood before her in all its Gothic splendor, 3 stories of dark stone and towering windows that seemed to watch her every step. "You must be the new girl," came a stern voice from the servants' entrance. Mrs. Pemberton, the head housekeeper, emerged wearing a crisp black dress and the weariest expression Sophia had ever seen. Her gray hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into permanent disapproval. "Yes, ma'am, Sophia Martinez. I'm here about the housemaid position. Follow me and keep quiet. Mrs. Helena Blackwood is having her afternoon tea, and she despises disruptions."
Ouch!
Pemberton's voice carried a warning that chilled Sophia to the bone as they entered through the servants' corridor.
Oh!
Sophia caught glimpses of opulent rooms through doorways, crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and artwork that probably cost more than her family's entire house. But what struck her most was the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence born from fear. "Listen carefully," Mrs. Pemberton whispered as they climbed the narrow servant staircase. "Mrs. Blackwood has very specific expectations. You speak only when spoken to. You keep your eyes down. You never, ever contradict her, no matter what she says or does. Understood?" Sophia nodded, though something inside her bristled at the instructions. They reached the servants' quarters, and Mrs. Pemberton opened a small door to reveal a modest room with a single bed, dresser, and window overlooking the gardens. "This is yours. Dinner is at 6 sharp in the servants' hall. Tomorrow, you start at 5 in the morning." As Mrs. Pemberton turned to leave, Sophia couldn't help but ask, "What's she like?" "Mrs. Blackwood, I mean." The older woman's face darkened. "She's the storm we all weather, child.
Out.
Don't try to understand her. Just survive her." That evening, in the servants' hall, Sophia met the rest of the staff. Thomas, the aging butler whose hands shook slightly as he served soup, spoke in hushed tones about the old days when the house had laughter in its halls. James, a young footman, barely 18, bore a fresh bruise on his wrist that he tried to hide beneath his sleeve. "She threw a vase at me yesterday," he whispered to Sophia when no one else was listening. "Said I polished it wrong. Took me 3 hours to clean up the pieces." Sophia felt her stomach turn. "Ain't." "Why don't you leave?" James laughed bitterly. "And go where she makes sure we can't get references from other households. We're trapped here, just like—" He glanced around nervously and didn't finish the sentence that night. As Sophia lay in her narrow bed, she heard something that made her blood run cold, muffled sobbing coming from the room next door. She pressed her ear to the wall and heard fragments of whispered prayers in what sounded like Spanish. Someone else was crying themselves to sleep in this house of shadows. Through her small window, she could see the main house where warm light glowed from the master bedroom. Somewhere in that golden light lived Helena Blackwood, the woman who had turned this beautiful estate into a prison of fear. But also living there was Marcus Blackwood, the millionaire businessman she had yet to meet. Sophia pulled her thin blanket closer and made a silent promise to herself. She had come here out of desperation, needing work to support her sick mother back home. But she wouldn't let desperation turn her into another broken soul in this house. Whatever Helena Blackwood was, Sophia Martinez was stronger. She had to believe that, or she'd never survive what was coming. 3 weeks into her employment, Sophia had learned to navigate the treacherous waters of Blackwood Estate. She kept her head down, worked efficiently, and spoke only when necessary. Also watched, she noticed how Helena Blackwood moved through the house like a predator, her emerald eyes always searching for weakness to exploit. Helena was undeniably beautiful, tall, and elegant, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a wardrobe that could fund a small country, but there was something cold about her beauty, like a porcelain doll with dead eyes. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her whispered threats and cutting remarks were more effective than any scream. Sophia had only glimpsed Marcus Blackwood in passing, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, who seemed to exist in his own world. Always buried in business papers or phone calls, The servants spoke of him with a mixture of pity and respect, but never with the bone-deep fear they reserved for his wife. The evening that changed everything started like any other dinner party at Blackwood Estate. Lord Winston and Lady Victoria were visiting, along with the distinguished Judge Cameron. Sophia was assigned to assist with serving, which meant she would be in the same room as Helena for an extended period. The dining room was a masterpiece of intimidation, a mahogany table that could seat 20. Crystal glasses that caught the candlelight like trapped stars, and paintings of stern ancestors watching from the walls. Helena presided over it all like a queen holding court. "The salmon is divine, Helena dear," Lady Victoria was saying, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness of high society. "Of course it is. I personally train all the kitchen staff to my exacting standards," Helena replied with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Excellence doesn't happen by accident." Sophia was refilling water glasses when she noticed James near the sideboard, his face pale with concentration as he arranged the dessert service. His hands were trembling, whether from nerves or the lingering effects of Helena's latest punishment. Sophia couldn't tell. It happened in slow motion. James reached for a crystal dessert plate, and it slipped from his shaking fingers. The crash seemed to echo through the room like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to James, who stood frozen among the glittering shards. Helena's chair scraped against the floor as she rose slowly, deliberately. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but somehow filled the vast room. "James, darling." "Come here." The young man approached like a condemned prisoner walking to the gallows. Helena's smile grew wider, more terrible. "Our guests have traveled so far to dine with us, and you repay their generosity by destroying my grandmother's crystal. Tell me, James, what do you think would be appropriate consequences for such clumsiness?" I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll replace it for my wages." "Your wages," Lena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your entire year's wages wouldn't cover the cost of what you've destroyed. But perhaps there's another way." She turned to her guests with theatrical, "Grace, what do you think, friends? Should we make him eat his dinner off the floor, like the animal he's proven himself to be?" Lord Winston chuckled uncomfortably. Judge Cameron studied his wine glass with sudden fascination. Lady Victoria tittered behind her fan. Sophia felt something snap inside her chest. She watched James's face crumble with humiliation, saw the tears. He was fighting to hold back, and couldn't stay silent another second. "Actually," Sophia said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "I think the appropriate response would be accidents happen and then helping clean up. But then again, I was raised to believe that true class shows in how you treat people when they're vulnerable, not in how expensive your broken dishes are." The silence that followed was deafening. Helena's head turned toward Sophia with mechanical precision, her green eyes blazing with fury. Marcus Blackwood, who had been quietly reading a document throughout dinner, looked up for the first time all evening. "Excuse me?" Helena's voice was poison wrapped in silk. Sophia met her gaze steadily. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I just meant that kindness costs nothing but means everything. My grandmother used to say that anyone can break crystal, but it takes real character to mend hearts." For a heartbeat, the room balanced on a knife's edge. Then Lord Winston began to chuckle. Judge Cameron cleared his throat and said, "Wise grandmother, that one." Lady Victoria actually applauded softly. "Out of the mouths of babes," Marcus Blackwood said quietly. And when Sophia glanced his way, she found him looking directly at her with something that might have been approval. Helena's carefully constructed, mask cracked visibly, her cheeks flushed, red, her perfect composure shattered. For the first time since Sophia had arrived, the great Helena Blackwood looked exactly like what she was, a petty bully caught in the act. How dare you, Helena sputtered. But the damage was done. The guests were laughing now, not with Helena, but at her. The spell of fear was broken, if only for this moment. And in that moment, Sophia saw something she'd never expected to see: Helena Blackwood looking powerless. The days following the dinner party were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Helena's retribution was swift, and merciless Sophia found herself assigned to the most grueling tasks, from scrubbing the cellar floors to cleaning the mansion's highest windows. Her meals were reduced to scraps, her free time eliminated entirely. But something had shifted in the house's atmosphere. The other servants looked at Sophia with a mixture of awe and terror for what she'd done. Terror for what Helena might do to her. Thomas began leaving extra food in places where Sophia would find it. James, still working despite the bandage on his hand from cleaning up the crystal, whispered thank you whenever he passed her in the corridors. What Sophia didn't realize was that someone else had been affected by that evening's events. Marcus. Blackwood found himself thinking about the young maid at the most unexpected moments. During board meetings, he'd remember her steady voice cutting through his wife's cruelty. While reviewing contracts, he'd recall the way she'd stood her ground against impossible odds. There had been something in her eyes, not defiance exactly, but an unshakable sense of right and wrong that he hadn't seen in his world for years. He began to notice things he'd trained himself to ignore. The way servants flinched when Helena entered a room, the subtle signs of fear that permeated his own home, the fact that he, one of the most powerful men in the city, was as much a prisoner in this house as anyone else. Their first real conversation happened by accident. Sophia was in the library at dawn, dusting the endless rows of books when Marcus appeared in the doorway. She hadn't heard him approach and jumped when he spoke. Early riser, I see, Mr. Blackwood. Sorry I didn't know. You'd be needing the library. I'll finish this later. No, please continue. I often come here in the mornings. It's peaceful. He moved to his favorite chair near the window. But instead of opening his usual stack of financial reports, he watched her work. Sophia tried to focus on her dusting, but she could feel his eyes on her. It wasn't the predatory gaze she was used to from men of his class, but something else entirely: curiosity, perhaps even respect. You're from Mexico originally, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Guadalajara. No. Sophia kept her voice carefully neutral. Beautiful city. I had business there once, years ago. The people were, ... double quotes, searching for words. Genuine, authentic in a way that's rare in my usual circles. Sophia risked a glance at him. Marcus Blackwood was not what she'd expected. There were lines of weariness around his dark eyes, and something almost sad in his expression. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to smile. What brought you here? To America, I mean. My mother needed surgery. The doctors in Guadalajara said it was too complex for their facilities. Sophia's voice softened. I came here to earn money. For her treatment, Marcus nodded slowly. And is she... Better, thank you. The surgery was successful, but she still needs ongoing care. Sophia realized she'd shared more than she intended and quickly returned to her dusting. They worked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Marcus spoke again. That was brave, what you did at dinner the other night. Sophia's hand stilled on a leather-bound volume of Shakespeare. It was foolish, sir, perhaps, but it was also necessary. Sometimes foolish and necessary are the same thing. He stood and moved closer to the bookshelf where she worked. James tells me you've been defending the younger staff from my wife's excesses. Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd hoped her small interventions had gone unnoticed. I can't stand to see people hurt when they've done nothing wrong. Marcus was quiet for so long that Sophia began to wonder if she'd offended him. As she finally looked up, she found him studying her face with an intensity that made her breath. Cat, you remind me of someone, he said softly.
Sir, myself?
From a very long time ago, before I learned that compromise and silence were the price of success. He stepped back, the moment broken. Be careful, Sophia. Courage is a luxury that people in our positions can rarely afford. After he left, Sophia stood alone among the books, her heart beating strangely fast. There had been something in his voice, in the way he'd said her name. It suggested this conversation had meant as much to him as it had to her. She didn't know that Marcus had lingered outside the library door, fighting the urge to return and continue talking to the young woman who'd reminded him what it felt like to have principles. She didn't know that he'd begun finding excuses to be in parts of the house, where he might encounter Hertha Gardens where she hung laundry. the conservatory, where she watered Helena's exotic plants. What she did know was that Helena's treatment of her was growing more vicious by the day. Just that morning, Helena had accidentally spilled red wine on Sophia's only good dress and berated her for being clumsy. She'd assigned Sophia to clean the same bathroom 3 times, claiming it wasn't up to her standards. But there were small kindnesses that kept Sophia going. A warm coat left in her room when the weather turned cold. Her mother's medicine mysteriously paid for by an anonymous benefactor, according to the letter from the clinic. Repairs to the servants' quarters that happened overnight without explanation. Sophia suspected she knew who was responsible, but she couldn't be sure. All she knew was that in this house of shadows, someone was watching over her. And despite the danger, despite Helena's growing fury, she found herself hoping for more dawn conversations in the library with a man who seemed as lonely and trapped as she was. Helena's patience finally snapped on a gray morning in November. She summoned Sophia to her private study, a room decorated in shades of white and silver that felt as cold as its occupant. Helena sat behind an ornate desk, several documents spread before her like evidence in a trial. "Sit down, Sophia." Voice was deceptively calm, but Sophia could see the fury burning in her green eyes. Sophia remained standing. "I prefer to stand, ma'am." I said, "Sit." The words cracked like a whip. Sophia sat. Helena opened a leather folder and withdrew several photographs. She spread them across the desk where Sophia could see them, images of Sophia talking with Marcus in the library, walking together in the garden, their faces caught in what looked like intimate conversation. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Helena's voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. "Did you think you could seduce my husband right under my nose?" Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "These pictures show nothing inappropriate, Mrs. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood and I have exchanged perhaps a dozen words total." Helena's laugh was like breaking ice. "Oh, my dear girl, you underestimate me. I know exactly what's happening here. You think you're clever, don't you? The poor little maid who caught the rich man's attention. But you've forgotten something important. I own this house, I own these servants, and I own my husband."
Sophia.
Stood abruptly. "You don't own anyone. People aren't possessions, aren't they?" Lena rose as well, moving around the desk like a circling predator. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to leave this house today. You'll take nothing with you except the clothes on your back. And if you ever try to contact my husband or set foot on my property again, I'll make sure you never work anywhere respectable again. And if I refuse?" Lena smiled, and Sophia felt ice in her veins. "Then I'll call the police and report that some of my jewelry has gone missing. Funny how these things happen with new staff members. Of course, they'll search your room and miraculously find the evidence. Your word against mine, dear. Who do you think they'll believe?" Sophia stared at this woman who held such casual power over lives, who wielded cruelty like an art form. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. Then she remembered James's grateful smile, Thomas's fatherly concern, her mother's proud voice on their last phone call. "Do what you have to do," Sophia said quietly, "but I won't be threatened into running away." Helena's composure cracked completely. The study door opened without warning. Marcus Blackwood stepped inside, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. His dark eyes took in the scene, the photographs scattered across the desk, his wife's flushed face, Sophia's defiant stance. "Helena, what's going on here?" "Marcus, darling, perfect timing. I was just explaining to Miss Martinez that her services are no longer required." Marcus moved to the desk and examined the photographs. His expression was unreadable, but Sophia noticed his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "You had me followed." "Of course not. I simply wanted to ensure our staff were maintaining appropriate professional boundaries." "Our staff." Marcus picked up one of the photos, Sophia and him standing by the garden fountain. Their faces turned toward each other in conversation. "Tell me, Helena, what exactly is inappropriate about this image?" "Marcus, really, must we discuss this in front of Sophia?" "Yes, I think we must, since she's the subject of your accusations." Marcus set the photo down carefully. "Sophia, would you mind telling my wife about our conversations?" Sophia's throat felt dry as paper. We've discussed books, sir, and my mother's health. You asked about my homeland? Lena, does that sound like seduction to you? Helena's face was turning an alarming shade of red. You don't understand what she's doing. She's manipulating you, making you feel sorry for her, the way you manipulated me 20 years ago. He turned to Sophia, his expression gentle. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You deserve better than to be caught in the crossfire of my cowardice. As if in a dream, Sophia heard herself ask, what happens now? Marcus glanced at his wife, who stood frozen like a statue of her former self. Now, Helena is going to pack her things and leave. Her lawyer will receive divorce papers by the end of the week, along with evidence of fraud and harassment that should ensure she never bothers anyone in this household again. Helena found her voice at last, but it came out as a broken whisper. You're choosing her over me. Marcus shook his head slowly. I'm choosing truth over lies, dignity over cruelty. I'm choosing to be the man I used to be before I let fear make me complicit in your games. He extended his hand to Sophia. Would you walk with me? There's something I need to tell you. The conservatory had always been Sophia's favorite part of the house. Surrounded by glass and filled with exotic plants, it felt separate from the rest of the mansion, a pocket of warmth and life in a place that had known too much coldness. Marcus had asked her to meet him there after Helena's departure, and now they stood among the flowering vines and tropical trees, the afternoon sun casting rainbow patterns through the glass ceiling. I owe you an apology, Marcus said, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied a climbing orchid. I should have stopped Helena's behavior years ago. I let my own cowardice enable her cruelty. Sophia shook her head. Couldn't have known I did know. His voice was heavy with regret. I knew, and I chose to look away because it was easier than confronting the truth about my marriage, about myself. They walked slowly along the gravel path between the plant beds. Sophia noticed that Marcus looked younger somehow, as if exposing. Helena's lies had lifted years from his shoulders. Why now? Sophia asked quietly. What made you finally act? Marcus stopped beside a fountain where water trickled over smooth stones. You did. Sophia felt her breath catch. Me. Watching. You stand up to Helena that night at dinner, seeing you refuse to be broken by her cruelty? It reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. He turned to face her fully, and Sophia saw something in his dark eyes that made her heart skip. I hired Detective Morrison 3 weeks ago, after our conversation in the library. I told myself it was to protect you from Helena's retaliation, but that wasn't entirely true. Then why? Because for the first time in 20 years, I met someone who made me want to be better than I was. Someone who reminded me that there's more to life than business deals and social standing. His voice grew softer. Someone who made me remember what it feels like to hope. Sophia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Marcus, he corrected gently. Please, Marcus. Ace name felt strange and wonderful on her tongue.
I don't understand.
You're one of the most powerful men in the city. And you're the strongest person I've ever met, he interrupted. You came to a foreign country alone to save your mother. You stood up to a woman who terrorized everyone around her. You showed kindness to people who had forgotten what kindness looked like. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see. The sincerity in his eyes. You're not just anything, Sophia. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Tears blurred Sophia's vision. She thought of the frightened girl who had walked through the estate's gates just months ago, desperate and alone. She thought of her mother, healthy now and able to smile again. She thought of the servants who had become like family, who could finally work without fear. I never imagined, she whispered. Neither did I, but sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never see coming. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hands in his. I know this is complicated. I know there will be people who don't understand or approve, but I also know that life is too short to waste on fear and pretense. Sophia looked down at their joined hands, his strong and warm, hers smaller but steady. When she looked up, she found him watching her with patient hope. What would happen if we dot 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 if I dot 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 if you gave us a chance? Marcus smiled, and Sophia realized it was the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. Then we'd figure it out together, day by day, step by step. Through the conservatory's glass walls, Sophia could see the gardens where she'd once hung laundry. While dreaming of a different life, she could see the servants' quarters where she'd cried herself to sleep that first night, feeling trapped and hopeless. But she could also see the main house, which no longer looked like a prison but like a home waiting to be filled with laughter instead of fear. My mother always said that the best gifts come in unexpected packages, Sophia said, a smile tugging at her lips. Marcus chuckled. Wise woman. I'd like to meet her someday if you'll have me. She'd like that. She's always telling me I need to find a good man who treats me like I deserve to be treated. How is that? Sophia stepped closer, her heart full of hope and possibility, like an equal, like a partner, like someone worth fighting for. Then I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of that honor, Marcus said solemnly. As the afternoon sun painted the conservatory in shades of gold, Marcus leaned down to kiss Sophia softly. Sweetly, a promise of new beginnings sealed with tenderness instead of possession. And in that moment, surrounded by growing things reaching toward the light, Sophia understood that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with fairy tale romance, but with the courage to stand up for what's right. Months later, when the servants gathered in the kitchen for their evening meal, they no longer spoke in whispers. Thomas regaled them with stories from his younger days. James had enrolled in night classes, his confidence restored. Mrs. Pemberton had even been heard humming while she worked. And sometimes, when the evening light slanted through the mansion's windows just right, they could hear laughter drifting from the conservatory, the sound of two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to build something beautiful from the ashes of fear. The Blackwood estate had finally become what it was always meant to be, not a monument to power and intimidation, but a home where kindness flourished and every voice mattered. And it had all begun with one young woman's refusal to let cruelty win. One moment of laughter that cracked the mask of tyranny, and two hearts brave enough to choose love over fear. As Sophia had learned that very first night when she heard crying through the walls sometimes, the most important thing you can do is refuse to let the darkness win. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to be kind.